I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kehillah. I am so thrilled to be here doing this. This is Kehillah, the independent progressive Jewish community of Richmond. I'm Rabbi Patrick. And before we launch this amazingly fun project, I wanted to tell you a little bit about who Kehillah is, what we do, maybe a little bit about who I am, and what you're going to experience here on our podcast. So first, we are the independent progressive Jewish community of Richmond, Virginia. You've probably heard the word Kehillah used in different congregations' names. We are not connected with each other, although spiritually we probably share a lot in common. Kehillah is the Hebrew word for community. So a terribly original name for a synagogue, right? And what I love about the history of Kehillah's name is that no matter what I do, I can't convince people that Kehillah is just one word, right? That we're not like Temple Kehillah or Congregation Kehillah or Kehillah RVA, which I understand why people are confused about the RVA thing. It's just that Kehillah.org was already taken. So we had to distinguish ourselves. So the website's KehillahRVA.org, but we're Kehillah. We're a community. Okay, one word. It's like Madonna, Cher. Not quite Lady Gaga, because I guess that's two words, but you get where I'm going with this. We're a community. So how did this community come about? It involved a cheap bottle of wine in a rock and roll themed Parisian hotel. So, but wait, before I tell you all that and tell you more about myself, I wanted to give you a sense of kind of how these podcasts are going to be structured, because this is the off one. This is the unique one right here. So going forward, what will happen is we'll have a theme of some kind. The first one we're going to have is called Significant Change Requires Significant Relationships. I'm really excited about that. And we'll have this opening intention. Maybe it's a reading of Jewish literature, sacred literature. Who knows what it's going to be? It's going to be Kehillah in our first episode. So we'll have a little bit of that, and it'll be a moment just for you to think about what your intentions are for that episode. And perhaps it's a spiritual grounding activity for me to think about what my intentions are for that episode, what I want to get out of it, and what we're doing together, and how incredible it is. Then I'll likely tell you a bunch of stories, kind of like the rock and roll themed Parisian hotel story that I'm about to tell you. And since Kehillah always has something going on, I'll remind you about it. We want to reach people, and it seems like social media and email and all this other stuff, it's just kind of not working. And so we're going to be telling you all about the different events. Maybe we're going to have a shout out for volunteers. Maybe we need some financial support. Who knows? That's the incredible thing about this. There's no rule. There is no guidebook for like how to, put together a podcast for a faith community. There isn't. I went on YouTube. I looked. I did the research. ChatGPT was not helpful either. If we had done that, it would sound like a robot was running everything, and that's not the case. Definitely not the case here at Kehillah. So we'll have some musical or other creative contributions. So we've got some very interesting people in our community, right? They all have different types of skills and things like that. And I'm very excited about sort of displaying some of that because, again, this is Kehillah. And our whole thing is you matter, like those two words. That's what grounds us. So we want to display kind of all the cool things that our congregants can do and how that contributes to this wonderful community that we have here in beautiful Richmond, Virginia. Hopefully you'll love listening to the podcast as much as we love making it, and you'll open your heart and you'll support what we're doing here. And yeah, that does mean every once in a while we're going to ask for financial support. And we only ask when we need it. And so if you listen to this podcast, if you get something out of it, we're going to ask you for a contribution. There might be some kind of bonus stuff. There might be some, hey, you gave, and so we're going to give you a little extra. We'll see. We'll see where we go. The way to make all of that possible, to make this podcast something that you're really interested in, is to send us an email. So for right now, it's rabbi@KehillahRVA.org. And don't worry, that'll be in the show notes and all of that good stuff. And from there, this thing's going to evolve, and it's going to evolve just like religion does. It evolves based on human need. And so whatever you need out of this, which we're going to explore together, that's what we're going to give you. And we will need your help to make that happen through your time, your talent, and your treasure. I'd also like to acknowledge Maggie the cat, who right now desperately wants my attention. and, is knocking over keyboards and all of that good stuff. So let's talk about a Parisian rock and roll themed hotel. This is about 2018. And, I have one job. I have my online life. But then there was a time where I didn't have anything going on in Richmond. So, I started off with one thing, and that was pretty cool. And I learned a lot, and I hopefully had an impact on people's lives. And then that thing just stopped working. And so we had to figure out what we were going to do next. Now, of course, the second that you lose a job, the best thing you can do is spend a bunch of money on a European vacation, right? That's perfect logic. But, listen, you book the vacation in advance, and so you go on the vacation. So going on this vacation, Rebbitzin and I, Stephanie Paps, find ourselves in our hotel. And listen, she knows how to book a hotel room. Stephanie, little known fact about Stephanie is that she is like a rock star when it comes to vacations. She just knows what to do. Like, you give her the budget, you tell her what you want to do. She can do things that travel agents can't do. It's just absolutely amazing. And she loves it. It's like how she relaxes, is thinking about vacation planning. So she gets us this kind of cool hotel that's like rock and roll, Motown, R&B themed. I don't remember what the name of our room was, but all of the different rooms were named after different hotels and artists and things like that. It was just super, super cool. And we were having a great time. We were really enjoying ourselves, but there's still, that thing that's weighing on you a little bit. What do we go home to, right? Now she has a job and I had my online life. So it's not like we were destitute or anything like that. We were going to be okay financially. It's just, this big thing you did, this thing that was part of why you moved here, that's gone now. And it's not coming back. And there is no sort of salvaging it either. Like, sometimes things just don't work out, and that's okay. Relationships end. The job that you thought you were going to do changes. Sometimes you have a job forever, and the nature of that job changes over and over again, and you're able to stay in the same place, but not doing the same thing, certainly. And that's just where we were. There was no going back to some improved version of what we were doing. It was time for a reboot. So we debated what those different options could be. It could be that I could just lean in more into my online work. Could be all different kinds of things. We just decided, no, there's something going on in Richmond. And we had lived in a couple of different places. So we had lived over on Cutshaw Avenue, kind of near Scott's Addition, before Scott's Addition had really built up into what it is now. And we had also lived in the northern part of Chesterfield in Bon Air. And then we lived on Grove Avenue, right in the Fan. We bounced around a little bit when we first got here. That's a whole other long story that's completely irrelevant to Kehillah. But in any case, we saw that there was a vibe. Like, every neighborhood you went to, there was a sense that there could be Jewish life there. And when you look at a map of Jewish Richmond, and this is a common complaint among people who live sort of south of the river, is that all of the Jewish life, with the exception of a small pocket, is all going to be north of the river. And in fact, that you can drive basically from VCU over past the West End and Parham Road, and you've seen it all. It's all the restaurants, it's all the synagogues, it's the JCC, it's anything you could possibly want all along one single stretch. The thing, though, is that what people want who are what we call unaffiliated is very different than what people who are affiliated want. And here's kind of how this plays out. If you're a person who wants what a synagogue has to offer in terms of life cycle, holidays, community, tikkun olam, and you want it all in one package and you want it all in one place that is really connected to the geography of that place, meaning we are the community at VCU, like Hillel, for example. That is a college thing. Like, that to be a college thing. Versus if you go all the way out to where KBI is, you go out to Knesset Bet Israel, right? You're in the Eruv, you're in the Orthodox community. That is a shtetl of its own, right? If you want that, likely you will move near that. Right? I know, like totally logical. Okay. You'll just live there, right? You'll like that neighborhood. You'll like those people. You'll like that community, that vibe. You'll like the clergy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That is how most of Jewish life has always operated, partially because of traditional Jewish ideas around Shabbat and walking to synagogue and how far it takes to walk and whatever. And then the suburbs come about. And in the 1960s, the conservative movement makes a decision that, okay, it's okay to drive on Shabbat as long as you drive to synagogue and back, things like that. But still kind of geographically defined. Well, if you fast forward to Richmond in 2018, you have a realization that there is a desperate desire for Jewish life, but not for conventional synagogue life. Meaning, it wouldn't have made sense to create something that feels like a Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist synagogue, but in the suburbs somewhere. And also, it wouldn't make sense to do that just in Scott's Addition, certainly not in The Fan, where there's already plenty of established Jewish life. It wouldn't have made sense to go all the way out to Woodlake and try to rent a clubhouse. It wouldn't make sense to go as far away as Chester or something like that to create that same model, because again, if you want to live near those things, you would already be living near those things. So there had to be this alternative model, this way of creating Jewish life for people who weren't going to invest in what, for lack of a better word, we might call the real estate of Jewish life, who did not want a community that was geographically bound, but was bound together in some other kind of spiritual, ideological, missional kind of way. So Rebbitzin and I had a lot of experience with this because back in Atlanta, we belonged to an independent minyan. Now, we knew that something like that probably wasn't going to work in Richmond because it required a certain kind of people. Communities are the people, right? So in Atlanta, we belonged to this sort of quasi-traditional independent minyan. It had this thing called a trechitza, or the California mechitza, as they call it sometimes. That, again, that's a whole other story. And you're going to hear that a lot from me, that phrase, whole other story, or that's a story for another time, because, man, I'm 42 and I feel young. I got a lot of stories. I've been in some crazy places and done some crazy things. So in any case, we knew something like that wasn't going to work, right? Because those people were people who knew the service. They knew how to lead it. It was a partnership. You didn't need a rabbi because you had everybody kind of on an equal level. Maybe some people were a little more Jewishly knowledgeable. Maybe some people were more liturgically capable. I always gave the sermon in that community because I just love the sermon. I love how it works. I love the art form of homiletics. And then, it was sort of potluck and all this other stuff. Also, the culture had changed, right? That had been kind of a while ago that we were involved in that world. And so, for example, things like having a potluck dinner. Man, there are people who would rather have dental surgery than have to do a potluck. Like, I'm going to get home and then make you food to bring to your house. To me, that sounds lovely. I think that's like super easy, but I'm that kind of person. Nowadays, money or resources don't mean as much to people as time does. So now you have this interesting situation and we're sitting in this sort of, I guess you would call it like a lounge area of this hotel in Paris, talking about all of this stuff and just kind of doing a little bit of an inventory, a little life story about everything we'd experienced, what works, what doesn't. And we sort of thought about another thing, that people really value their time. So you can't really ask too much. Also, though, no one wants to be a member of anything. Now, granted, we will pay for every kind of subscription service on the planet, right? In fact, I would almost say, shout out to my friends in big synagogues, stop calling it membership, call it a subscription and see what happens. That's my old days in marketing coming out there. I think it'd be interesting to see what would happen. At any rate, we knew people wouldn't do that, but people will pay for tickets. People understand you have to RSVP for something, especially if you're giving them something. Right? You can't just show up to a restaurant. I mean, especially even like in, 2018, like in the before times, you couldn't just show up. You need reservations. So people already understood those ideas. People understood going to things online. Again, in the before times. Even so, people got it. So there was a there. It's not like all of Jewish suburbia, and all of Scots Addition, all of these other areas is devoid of Jewish interest. It's just a matter of framing it in a way that works for people's lives and people's schedules. It's about offering lots of different kinds of things and in a lot of different kinds of areas. And if you do that, and if you make people make a commitment, right? Like you are going to RSVP, you are going to buy a ticket, and no, there's no refunds. If you can't make it, listen, we'll donate your ticket to somebody. And, that's a wonderful thing because there's people who can't afford to go to things, but would love to be involved. So we'll do that. And, that's that, right? And we'll see what works and we'll see what doesn't. And that's Kehillah. And one of the things that was really important to me was that unlike a lot of communities that you go to, the clergy, typically, like in a synagogue situation, you have the clergy who are hired by the community. And it's a job, right? And you have a contract and you get paid a certain amount, and you get a certain number of days off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The spouse leads their own life, right? They're taking care of kids. They have their own careers. They have their own passions, interests, whatever. But there is so much bleed over, right? Because people will ask like, well, why don't I see your spouse at Shabbat? Oh, wouldn't it be great if your spouse led the women's group, the men's group, whatever? There had to be some kind of acknowledgement. And you find this in the Chabad Lubavitch world, which I think is incredibly meaningful, that in their case, women, and in our case, women too, are spiritual leaders, right? They are dealing with things on a certain kind of level that are spiritual in nature. And there has to be a title for that. There has to be an acknowledgement of that. And so what I said to Stephanie was, we can do this. Like, we can create this thing. We are co-equal clergy. You lead an incredible service, which is like already an amazing thing. But also you need to know what's going on. You need to know what's going on in board meetings. You need to have the ability to chime in, right? Your voice is equal to mine in this way because you're the one who sees the stress. You're the one who opens her home to community. So there has to be that kind of acknowledgement of the spiritual role that you play. And she was up for it. So there you go. So that's why sometimes when you come to an event, if she's here, you'll hear the phrase Rebbitzin, right? So it's an acknowledgement that, yes, technically my spouse isn't quote unquote clergy. She's not a rabbi. She's not a cantor, but she plays a significant role, an equal role in this community. So pretty much over a bottle of cheap wine in a hotel in Paris, all of this kind of came together. And so you can't just create like, oh, it's Jewish life in Richmond, let's have Shabbat dinners. Like that doesn't work because that's not terribly meaningful, if I can be honest with you. That doesn't really ground people in a significant way. So you got to come up with something that is missional. And that's where we came up with this idea of You Matter. Now, You Matter has a whole other story. I first heard it from a very dear friend of mine, a rabbi named Rob Thomas. No, not the guy from Matchbook 20. It's a different Rob Thomas. But Rabbi Rob used to say this to me and to people he knew and worked with all the time. He's an incredible guy. And so I thought, well, that's it, really. I mean, if you think on a spiritual level, that phrase You Matter, I mean, that has all kinds of implications, right? It has Kabbalistic, Jewish mystical implications. It has very humanistic implications. You know, you work in this world with these hands and these feet and this mind, right? So this You Matter, that's it. And Kehillah, I mean, that's a great word for something. It has a strong K sound, which you generally want strong K sounds, like Coca-Cola, right? Like those strong K's are very meaningful to people for some reason. So Kehillah and You Matter. And then over time, as we started doing stuff, we began to develop this idea of what on a human level is the hardest thing to do. And how do we help with that? Because, okay, great. Listen, Shabbat dinners, life cycle, holidays, that's wonderful. But there's this real important chesed, right? There's this important idea of helping one another. And what is the hardest thing you can possibly say to someone? And thinking about my life and the people that I've known and who I've loved and people I've lost, it's this phrase, I need help. That's the thing that gets people. It does every time. I need help. And so that was what we were going to do, right? We would basically focus on inspiration. And we would inspire people, very much physically to do things in this world and, spiritually, obviously, and then socially as well, intellectually too, right? So we were going to provide all of this inspiration, and we were going to think about inspiration that is, spiritual and intellectual, and then this third component, physical in this world, getting things done. Now, this is where we decided to make another kind of choice that was a little bit different. So I tell you, if you go to any of the communities here in Richmond and beyond, you're going to find a lot of social justice work. And it's incredible. Like the things that these communities do around here and the organizations they're involved with, man, that is fantastic stuff. And so we started thinking about it, like, do we add more to that by doing that? Because sometimes, there's two kinds of logic on this. And my favorite metaphor is opening a pizza shop. So if you're going to open a pizza shop, you have two options. One is to open a pizza shop where there is no pizza shop, right? So you have a geographically defined monopoly. The other option, which is counterintuitive, is to open a pizza shop where there are a lot of pizza shops. Why would you do that? Because people in that area love pizza. So you're then competing amongst these other pizza shops, but you define who you are and what you do and how your product is in some way very different, and you create your own niche. You don't want to be in the middle. You don't want to have like a community that has just enough pizza shops, and then you add yours, which is completely unnecessary. So there's this idea of you either go where everybody is or you go where nobody is, okay? It's this idea of you open a community, you create a community where there is community or where there is no community at all. There's also this idea with value. You either create value where there is none or you create value where there already is a tremendous amount. So thinking about it from a social justice perspective, it's like, well, crazy thought, but what if everybody's better at this than we are? Meaning, if you're trying to start a community, you don't have a lot of people. And if you don't have a lot of people, you don't have a lot of boots on the ground. And you really can't impact a huge issue, a huge topic. And also, how are you going to decide what you value and what you don't? So now you have to have committees and boards. No one wants to be on committees and boards. And the people who do, they wind up on these committees and boards forever because no one else wants to do it. And then they get resentful. I can't leave, right? They're stuck. It's not fun anymore. It's a job, and it's a job they don't want. So what if we did something a little bit different? How about instead of social justice, we think about social action? Okay. So thinking about social action, how is that different? So social justice, big picture, dealing with the housing crisis, dealing with food insecurity, right? Big stuff, big issues, often related to public policy or collecting a lot of money to do something. Hard to do when you're a tiny community. So maybe think about it a little bit different. Maybe it's social action, right? Because if there are all of these different ways that we can, impact our community on a city level, a state level, a national level, but the person sitting next to us is hungry, but the person sitting next to us doesn't have a home, right? No amount of social justice is going to directly get them what they need when they need it. Big picture, maybe it helps in the future, but right now, not so much. So this is where we made a little bit of a decision. How about we focus on social action? How about we focus on chesed? How about we focus on, do you need groceries? Okay, we got you. Do you need a place to live? Okay, we're going to find you one. Do you need social services? Cool. We're not a social services agency, but boy, do we know where those organizations are. And that's how we decided to differentiate ourselves. Again, it's not because we don't care about social justice, but it's because we know what we're good at, which is social action. You might say, in a certain kind of way, we're staying in our lane. And boy, has that grown, because we started off with just, maybe the gift cards for groceries a little bit. During COVID, certainly we did a lot of sort of things for people. We even mowed someone's lawn once. So we did kind of that stuff. But then we realized, here at Kehillah, we've got people who know how to do stuff, right? So we have a pharmacist who can help people with figuring out what to do about their Medicare. And we have a financial planner who can help people figure out what a budget is. Some of us didn't grow up with people who knew how money worked. And so you sit down and you kind of help that person. Maybe you need someone to help you with your relationship. Maybe you need someone who has some training in trauma. Maybe you need someone who can help you learn how to cook, right? We have those people. And so that's how we created Kehillah Cares. Again, those hard K sounds. People love the hard K sounds. So Kehillah Cares. So we have this list of just these incredible people. And whether you need music therapy or you need help because you're coming out and you're trying to figure out how all that works, right? Or maybe you need help with finding a scholarship for your kid to go to college. You just go on our website and you see all of our people and all the incredible things that they can do. And you just sign up. Now, you have to be a member. And how do you become a member? You just join the email list. That's simple. And you come to events because we kind of need to know that this is something you care about, the way that we care about it. People put in a lot of effort, and we just want to know that you have a little skin in the game. So you come to stuff, and you be part of the community, and then when you need help, you got it. We got your back. So that is sort of what we did. And so we came home, and we did a bunch of events, and some of them worked, and then we did some events that didn't work. Our first high holidays, the electricity stopped working at the venue that we rented, and so it was dark, and we're literally saying Kaddish, and no one can read the Machzor. We did a casserole Shabbat, which we thought was genius and cheeky and very sort of vintage and mid-century modern, and like 3 people showed up. So some things, just didn't work. And then some things work so incredible. And I'm like, why did anyone sign up for that? Right. So we did an event. It was a Tu B'Shvat Seder. Oh my gosh. People went nuts. It was like people were texting me, 15 minutes before the event started being like, hey, can I still get tickets? I'm like, no, you can't. We've been telling you this for 3 weeks. So you never know. You never know what's going to work and what's not. I never knew I would do as many weddings as I do. And you could say, well, but those people, I don't see those people at service. That's fine. That's okay. Because we're still impacting them, right? We're still inspiring them. And they pay for those services. And those services in turn go to fund all of the other work we do. And that's okay. Someone gets a free ticket to a Shabbat dinner because someone else had a baby naming. Even if we never see that baby, we never see that family, they are impacting their community. And that matters deeply. Again, you matter. So this is basically what we're doing. We've got a podcast now. Never thought that would be something we would do. And I hope it works out. I hope you enjoy it. Make sure to send an email to rabbi@kehillahrva.org. That's rabbi@kehillahrva.org. And some upcoming announcements. So we have June 1st, Shavuot at Art Factory in Midlothian, and we are going to have a Mount Sinai mountain of ice cream. I mean that. No joke. There's going to be an ice cream mountain. We're going to do a really cool performance. There's going to be pizza. There's going to be art activities. There's going to be library books. So we're going to have kids' books that you can take home with you at our big free Jewish book bonanza that we plan to have. There's going to be prizes. There's going to be all kinds of cool stuff. So hope you'll come. Again, Art Factory, June 1st. How do you get tickets? You go to kehillahrva.org. This event is free, but an $18 donation would go a long way. Thanks again, friends. Thank you for listening to Kehillah's podcast. Again, rabbi@kehillahrva.org. Let me know what you think, because remember, you matter.